Yo, what is going on, everyone? This is Conversations with Brian and Elijah, episode number 10. We hit the double digits today.
Yes.
And today we will be discussing something a bit more philosophical in nature. Essentially, we're going to be talking about this idea of having free will or not having free will and the implications that might be. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about consciousness, right?
Yeah.
What is consciousness and do people have consciousness and what does that even mean?
Definitely.
So that's what we will be discussing today, and we're super excited. I'm super excited because I know this topic on a surface level, and I'm always excited to kind of dig a little bit deeper into something that I may not know a lot about, but will try to logically think through it.
Definitely. I feel the same way. I love to have conversations because I think that's one of the great ways to learn stuff is like to start to have a conversation about something. Even if you don't know a whole lot about it, you can learn from the other person or start to get the mind in motion to where you can actually think about it. And then, you start asking yourself the right questions. And then that leads to you doing the proper research. And then it just becomes a whole thing until you have a really good, educated mind on the subject.
Yeah. I 100% agree.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. So a couple days ago, or yesterday, I tweeted out, and I'm actually reading, so have you ever heard of Stephen Hawking's The Grand Design, his famous book? You know Stephen Hawking, right?
Yeah, I know who Stephen Hawking is.
Yeah.
I read a long time ago, there was another book that he wrote, something about time. What is it called?
Brief History of Time or something like that?
Brief History, yep, that's the one I read, yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I'm rereading The Grand Design. I read it like when I was in 9th grade, 8th grade, something like that, a few years ago. But I wanted to reread it again. And something that he said in there, which is really interesting because I've been obsessed with this question for like the last 2 years of my life, is about free will. And anyways, he makes a claim in there, but it led me to tweet this out, right? The belief of absolute materialism, all that exists is materials, is incompatible with the belief that humans have free will. Whether you believe in free will or not, like you would agree that statement is true. So if everything inside the universe is materialistic, then everything is governed by physical laws, then there would be no room for free will. This is what Stephen Hawking says in his book. I believe it's actually on page 33 or 32. So if you want to look it up yourself, you can check it there. And it's really interesting because, every single thing is governed by physical laws. So every object that interacts with each other in the universe is governed by physical laws. We are inside the universe. We are objects that interact with each other. Therefore, we should be governed by physical laws too. And, that makes perfect sense. Now, to say that, no, we still have free will with what we know about that scientific determinism, I believe you start to give the argument that for some reason we're able to supersede physical laws. And if we could supersede physical laws, in other words, that would mean the supernatural, would it not? I mean, the supernatural is to be able to supersede physical laws. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So this led me to tweet out something else, right? And once again, I think both the atheist and the person, the theist, whatever you want to call it, that believes in God would agree with this. Both sides would agree. This is just a neutral statement that is basically fact. To deny that the supernatural exists is to deny that you have free will, that you have the ability to make decisions, that you have the ability to rationalize. So if you want to say that there is no supernatural, then you also, with that view, I believe that you have to take the stance that there is no free will. So the implications of this conversation that we're going to have today are pretty enormous, in my opinion. Would you agree with those implications, or?
No, yeah, for sure. It's always such a fascinating argument.
Yeah.
This idea of like free will.
Yeah. And I want to clarify real quick. When it comes to supernatural, we're not getting into any specific religion. Like we're not saying, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, any religion that you practice. We're not getting into that. We're really just getting into supernatural. Perhaps not even God, just the fact that there's something outside of the universe. There's something immaterial. Is that a fair stance that we could take for this?
100%, yeah.
Okay, cool,
yeah.
cool.
I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, man, I've been really thinking about this. But yeah, the implications are huge, and I'm like, wow, dude, like, if you just want to take a total scientific view, like, you really can't believe in free will. It just, and if you don't have free will, then how can you rationalize? So you can have this complex scientific theory, but you can't even rationalize it. How can you even believe, if you can't rationalize something, how can you hold that stance? It's not reasonable by definition because there is no reason, because it's determined.
Okay, got it. Interesting. So when you were saying all that, that was yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. The whole everything is governed by physical laws.
Yeah.
Therefore, you can't have free will. Now, this is the first thought that kind of came to mind, just to kind of see what you think about this. To take the other end, me having a thought is simply a bunch of neurotransmitters in my brain firing, and I make that decision, right? Who's to say that those, wouldn't you say that those neurotransmitters firing and making a thought is within the physical law of the universe? It's still governed by the physical law? Because my brain is just biology, right? It's anatomy. It's still governed. It's a tangible thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. No, that would make sense. That would be brain waves or whatever. But there's I don't want to. Are you going somewhere with that? Because I don't want to interrupt your point. But
no. I want to hear what you say.
So
what you think about
there's actually an argument. I think it's called substance dualism, which basically says that there's a difference between mental states of mind and physical brain states. And so it's like, what you just said, like, you could say that, like, it gets so complicated because we're literally trying to understand ourselves. The brain is trying to understand itself. And it's like, yeah, no, it would, to me, at first glance, when you look at that, like, yeah, it would make sense that everything inside your brain, like the neurons firing with each other, that would just be governed by physical laws, just like chemistry, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. But
there's like a bunch of different things, right? Like the whole, so you said consciousness is materialistic. Is that what you said?
Well, no, I'm debating that, but I'm saying, like, if you take a full scientific determinism view, you would say that. And really, I really would even push it further and say, if you take the full scientific determinism, right, everything is governed by physical laws. There's only materials, right? The universe is just materialistic. There's nothing immaterial. If you take that, I would even argue that there's really no such thing as real consciousness. How could there be? If we're just,
look.
If we're just governed by physical laws, in other words, we're just robots in motion.
Right.
There's no free thought. Like, it's like you're just, like me talking to you right now, I'm just reacting to my environment. And I think, I'm not really doing anything. That's a view that Stephen Hawking takes. Like, he's a very smart man. And, like, I have a great respect for him. But, like, this is a real serious thing. Sam Harris, are you familiar with Sam Harris?
Yeah, I love Sam Harris. Yeah.
He wrote a book called Free Will, which I'm going to go reread again today after this conversation. We're probably going to do a part 2 on this, just so you know. Yeah, dude. So it gets complicated, and, like, there's a different interpretation of data too, right?
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, like, so here's a fact, not debatable. Your brain decides, like, there's information present in your brain to do something before you're consciously aware of it. So, for example, me going to reach for my water bottle, my body's already doing that before I was consciously aware of it. And I believe that you could take 2 interpretations of that data. One, you could take, okay, that literally proves there's no free will. You didn't even decide to grab that water bottle before, you're consciously aware. Yeah. The other argument is, well, no, you have a soul or mind, whatever you want to call it, something immaterial that interacts with your physical brain that told you to go reach for that. And that's why there's a delay in time. Because the fact is, this is a fact that's not debatable. The fact is, there's stuff present in your brain, right, before you become aware of it. And then eventually you become aware of it. And that it's like milliseconds. But that delay, right, some would argue is the soul interacting with the physical brain. That's the delay. That part right there is the delay. Does Did I explain that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
So there's two interpretations of the data, and this is why it gets so complicated, because you can kind of look at it either way you want to go.
Interesting.
I know I'm basically dominating the conversation, but let me give you one more thing. The book I'm reading, he makes the argument based off the law of identity, which basically says that if two things are identical, X and Y are identical, right? Then every aspect of X must be true of Y, and vice versa. So if you take two guys, okay, they're both named John. They're both 5 feet tall. They're both males. Or let me redo that example. Let's say you take a guy, Brian and Elijah. Okay, they're both males. Okay, so they're the same so far, but I'm going to argue that they're different. Well, one aspect is that Brian is 20, Elijah is 18. Therefore, they're different. Like, I know that's like, oh, this is common sense, but that's the logical way to prove that something is not identical based off the law of identity. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
And honestly, it's sometimes really, I mean, it's not practical to think like that, but like for everyday use. But when you really want to get into detailed arguments, you need to be able to prove things
right.
with certain logical laws or something.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So what he argues with the law of identity in the book is that there's a difference between conscious states of mind, mental states of mind, and then like physical, like brain. And therefore, if true, they're different, because not every aspect is true of the conscious states of the brain states, which would then make them different based off the law of identity, which is a sound argument if you can prove those premises. Can you prove those premises?
Well, okay, so basically, the world. When you say the world is materialistic, you're meaning that the world is comprised up of physical objects.
Matter and energy.
Matter and energy.
That's it.
That's it. So there's 2 points. 2 points to that.
Yep.
The first one, have you ever heard of matter can never be created or destroyed?
Yeah,
that law.
Second law of thermodynamics, I believe, or the conservation of matter. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so then that begs the question. Well, if it couldn't have been created or destroyed, then how did it get created?
Yeah. So now you're getting into you know
what I mean?
Yeah.
So that is like, okay, well, wait a minute. And then the second thing is, have I told you the philosophical argument about how nothing exists? Like, you can't prove that physical objects exist.
Why don't you go ahead and restate that here? Like, refresh my mind.
So basically, you can't. I mean, how can I prove that, say, this mug right here exists? Right? How would I go about proving that it exists? Well, I'll say, well, I can feel it, I can hear it, I can, see the color of it. I can prove physical. I can use my senses basically to prove that it exists.
Yeah.
But there, Rene Descartes basically said that you can't rely on the senses to prove that anything exists, because what if there is an evil genius controlling your mind that is fooling you to believe that this is a mug in front of you, but it's actually not. So then, I mean, how would you counter that argument, right? Okay, let's say that you can't necessarily prove that anything exists, because there can be something greater controlling your mind, right? Well, then the only thing that you can prove that exists is your own thoughts. Because even if there was an evil genius controlling your mind, you would still need a mind to be controlled. So I can't prove that anything in this entire world exists except for myself, basically.
But that's the thing. What is yourself? Like, I feel like that's almost an argument leaning more towards free will and like soul and mind, because like the self is like a weird thing. Like, if you're just like, for example, like water is different than me because I have like awareness of who I am, the self, the ego, whatever you want to call it. But water doesn't go, oh, I'm water. And, what is it like to be water? No one knows. It's like because water's not like a conscious thing, right? But like I could say, well, I know what it's like to be human.
Hmm.
So like I feel like in a sense you're kind of getting at like the only thing that we can't really prove is ourselves with the thoughts thing. I mean, that makes the argument makes total sense to me because like, yeah, how do you know that you're not in a lab right now and someone's doing, shocking different, like, once again, this is actually, they've done studies on this. So if you think I'm crazy, I'm not crazy. I promise you. That's what a crazy person says though. Right. But,
Yeah, you're talking about brain in the vat philosophy, basically. It's like
yeah.
the iteration of Rene Descartes, what he thought. Yeah.
But so Stephen Hawking wrote in his book, The Grand Design, he also said that, there's studies where they've done, they do brain surgery on people. They shock certain parts of the brain and like they get their hands to move, they get their arms to move, they get their lips to move. So yeah, going back to your argument, or what's the guy's name?
His name is Rene Descartes.
Rene Descartes. That's a dope name. But Ray Descartes, his argument, I messed that up, huh? He says, like, how do you know that someone's not doing brain surgery on you right now, shocking parts of your brain, making you think, that I'm actually talking to a guy named Brian, but maybe I'm not, like, how do you you don't, but you do know that there must be some type of like thought or whatever, some type of like awareness. So like, dude, that's a really good argument, actually, I think, on the side of there being like a mind or something.
Yeah.
You can't even that materials exist with that argument in that framework. Can you?
Yeah.
You can or you can't?
You're saying that you can use that argument to prove that there are no material things, or
No,
there
I'm
are
saying
material?
I'm saying with that argument you cannot prove, like with that argument you can't even say that materials exist. You can only say like basically
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't even say like this phone exists or this microphone exists. Like you just can't within that framework of that argument, right?
Yeah, you can't prove anything. And there's this dude that basically believed that he said that nothing exists if you can't perceive it. So he took half of Rene Descartes' argument. So he said like right now I'm in my room, but like my bathroom right now doesn't exist because I'm not looking at it. So he thought basically everything behind your head doesn't exist until you look at it.
So in other words, if you're not observing it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's in quantum physics, I don't want to go too into this because I don't know too much. I got to reread and re-understand, but something about the observer effect. I think that's a thing in quantum physics. Like if someone's not observing something, then it's not there. It's only until we observe it. It's interesting. But okay, so going more into it, right? Consciousness, right? I was doing some research. Let me read you my thoughts. I wrote them down. Okay.
Yeah, this is all like super fascinating stuff. That is like...
So I put right here, if you can build a robot that can freely think and make decisions on its own, then you can prove that consciousness is nothing more than just a physical thing, since the machine you built is 100% materialistic. So you build a robot, basically AI, and they're doing that now in some, not the way that I said, but to varying degrees. If you build something that can think on its own, and you build it's just a machine built off materials, then basically you prove that consciousness is just materialistic, which would then lead to you knowing that, yeah, there's no such thing as like free will.
Not to get too
too deep.
No, well, I mean, no, it's good to get deep, but I'm gonna take it like kind of theorist, sort of.
Okay.
The simulation theory.
Okay.
Yeah, have you heard of this whole? Okay, well, to give you like the cliff notes, basically, it's this idea that technology grows exponentially, right? So, what, like 20 years ago was Pong, right? You had like two kind of like pixels on a screen.
Very simple.
And then now you have, only 20 years later, you have like these like photorealistic like video games. You have like virtual reality where you can basically go into the game, right? It doesn't look that good yet, But you know, it's still it's starting to become more realistic. So think about, what if that double in 20 years, another 20 years, or like 100 years, or 200 years, or 500 years?
Yeah.
The theory is that we're going to create a video game that is so realistic that you won't be able to tell the difference between that and actual reality, base reality,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so then the argument is, well, then if we could do that now, then who's to say that that hasn't been done before, and we're the video game, and we're kind of being, I guess, controlled by something else, which would tie into that kind of free will idea, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, if we're being controlled, then maybe we don't have free will. So those two kind of are connected. And I could see, I mean, if you accept that technology is growing exponentially, then, I mean, you kind of have to think about where it's going to go in like 100 years, 200 years, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You know, with that argument though, I would ask, well, one, I feel like in video games you would get some like abnormal stuff, like why doesn't the sky just turn like red? Or, you know, why aren't like, I don't know, dogs starting to talk? Like some weird like kind of glitches or hacks or whatever, right? The other thing too is you say, well, okay, they create a video game where this is real reality. Well, what is the actual first real reality? Like if they're basing it off of reality to create a simulation of reality, well then what is the real reality? That's what I would object to with the simulation theory.
So basically, so when we create a video game, right, we create all these superheroes, we create all these like super action packed, like fun video games, right? So one stipulation is that base reality was so boring that we had to create a video game that was less boring than base reality. So I don't know the full answer to your question, but one idea is that maybe base reality was boring, so we had to create this simulation that was fun in a sense. And then what was the first part you said? Why doesn't the sky, the glitches, right?
Yeah.
Glitches. Yeah, I don't know about glitches. I mean, have you heard there's like a meme that says oh yeah, there's like a tear in the universe or something here. Like you see like a bird flying in a single spot or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I mean there's weird things that happen, yeah, for sure.
so I mean, you could say that those are the glitches, and you know, I don't know if I fully buy into the simulation theory just because it's kind of like very meta, but it does tie into the whole free will idea.
Yeah.
You know, is there free will or not?
Just to add one more thought to it, you know, how do you beat the game? Like, is that what they mean by you're winning in life? Like, what is that what we mean? Like, how do you beat this game? You know, um, pretty interesting stuff for sure.
Yeah, I mean, life is kind of sort of a game, right? Like people win, people lose. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thought for sure, and yeah.
Yeah. So going back to free will, though, I mean, like, do you believe that you have free will?
Well, I think everyone would like to think that they have free will, right? Well, I mean, most people. I mean, would you like to think that you have free will, or
Yeah,
okay?
definitely.
Because like if you have free will, that means you're in a hundred. I think people like to be in control, right? You're in 100% control of
Your
having
life.
free will.
Yeah.
There's this argument that it's half and half, and I forget where I read it, but there's this idea that you have half control of the world.
The world?
So, well, of free will, you have half free will.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I mean, because well, yeah, I mean, it gets really complicated, right? Because like I could go outside and like I don't know, throw an orange like at someone, right?
Yes.
Uh, and that would be me interacting with the physical world. But did I already have that thought previously? Like there's if there is free will, that means that every single person can interact with other people, therefore disrupting their free will, if that makes any sense. So like I could go outside and like give someone a high five.
Yeah.
Did they have the free will to know that I was going to give him a high five? You kind of get what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
Like if you accept the argument of free will, there's just so many moving parts.
Yeah, like everybody's a free agent type of thing, right? Agency.
Right.
That's kind of what I'm getting at here is, do we have agency? Which is, agency is the soul, the mind, whatever.
So are you buying into the free will argument, or do you think that there's better evidence to suggest that you don't have free will?
Dude, I'm so torn right now. Like, I was literally just reading before we called. I'm reading all the information. Let me tell you. I have a group chat of like friends, so I've been texting them this. So let me show you. Philosophical fact is, without free will, there is no room for rationale, which makes all the claims about us not having free will seem not reasonable by definition. So someone goes, I have done the reasoning, I have thought clearly, I have looked at the data, I've analyzed it. There is no free will. But if there's no free will, there's no reasoning. How could there be? How could you choose between this is a true, this is false, this is true, this is false, when you don't even have the free will to do that? So there's that claim, right? So like, let's just say that there is no free will. How can I rationally think that? And to me, that bothers me. But then when I look at the evidence, right? Scientific determinism, everything in the universe is governed, right? There's just materialistic things. That's like, yeah, that seems true, right? But and another question I would have is, okay, some people argue that free will is just an illusion. Why? What is the evolutionary benefit of it being an illusion? How does having free will, the illusion of free will, help us better reproduce and better survive? Like, why would we evolve to have the illusion of free will? What good does it do?
Yeah, and like it's so weird because I mean, do other animals have so consciousness, right? Is that unique to humans? Or would you say that animals have some mild form of consciousness?
I
Or
would,
like,
I would say they have some mild form. Would you say that?
yeah, I would agree. I would tend to think that. But and that's an interesting argument too, the whole evolution, like what's the evolutionary benefit of having consciousness?
Yeah. You only need to eat, and you only need to reproduce. That's literally all your biology needs in terms of evolution. So like, why, and maybe I'm wrong, but I really don't, that's what I've learned about evolution. What else, why do you need to be able to think about things and do abstract stuff? Like, how does that make you better able to survive? I really don't see how.
Well, I mean, I guess if you have consciousness, if you're to take a very primitive look at it, you're able to craft better tools and better
like imagination helps you better
farming.
Farming,
create better tools that will allow you to create like better tools to hunt, shelters, right? So you could procreate and build, you could procreate more, right? If everyone is surviving, then there's more procreation.
Yeah. So here would be my really interesting question, distinguishing, okay, why are we more conscious than other animals? Like, we are more intelligent than other animals. I don't think anybody would argue with that, right? We are the most intelligent animal. So does intelligence, what is intelligence too? Like I mean, I kind of have an idea. Intelligent, like the definition I'd kind of give you right now is the process of like of making decisions like based off of kind of like logic. Like I guess the best way to define for me, the best way to define intelligence is to give you a definition of like random. Like if something's just random, like you kind of just pick it out of a hat, like A, B, C, I don't know, just pick a random one. There's no intelligent process behind it. It's no like decision being made, no type of like logic or like fact to back up the reason why you picked the thing. So like to me that's like intelligence. I don't know if that definition kind of helps or not.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting. There was a student in one of my classes when the professor asked to define intelligence. He said that intelligence seems to be going against rationality, which is weird, but I it was like interesting, and I didn't understand what it means. But then he basically said, I mean, it makes sense to go to go towards your animalistic instincts, but to ignore them is like that's like true intelligence. Like you're ignoring your instincts, which is intelligence.
yes,
You
I
kind of get what I'm
would,
saying?
I would completely agree with that. Yeah. I mean, if you just look at the brain, like the limbic system is more like the animalistic, right? And the
Yeah.
prefrontal cortex is the more logical part. So yeah, if you're thinking pure logically, you're ignoring the animalistic part of your brain. So to me, that makes perfect sense. That is a really good argument. And like, that's kind of what a lot of ancient philosophers taught. They taught to, like in Stoicism, they taught to be more logical and more reason based than acting on your impulses, your like natural desires.
Hmm.
And like, okay, self control, right? Isn't that so? That's like more free will. Like, if you are able to, okay, like fear, for example, fear. If I'm scared of something, how is it that I'm over to overcome that fear? Like, and when I say I, is that like something apart from like my physical body? Because like, if I'm just going through with nature, like, wouldn't fear just be able to control my system to where I couldn't override it? Like, it's not even a possibility, right? Or
Hmm.
does that make sense? Or do I need to? Should I
Yeah. Well, you're saying basically that it's very difficult to override fear.
No, I'm saying like the fact that we can override fear, isn't that kind of like
Got it.
there's something different from your natural?
Got it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah, that further stipulates the differentiation between you said the physical mind and the mental mind, right? There's
Yeah.
two separate
Like the
states of mind.
soul, the mind, and then like the brain. The brain is just, it's just these cells,
Mm-hmm.
big glob of cells basically all working very complex together. Um, but it feels like the mind is something different.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And then, I think that like then the question is like, why do we have consciousness? Like what seems to be the point? Uh, and I mean, are we able to create consciousness too, right? Going back to the whole AI thing, um, or is AI just a mirror of
That's a hard
human
question.
consciousness?
So to really blow your mind, to get this thing going even crazier. So you asked, can we create AI, make it conscious? Well, the first question is, what is consciousness? Because in order to be able to create something, you have to know what it is. And I don't know if we know what consciousness is. How would you define it? I mean, I think I asked you this, right? How would you define it?
Uh, Consciousness.
Here, I want to read
I
you your
would.
text. Let's look at
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah. Read that. Read that.
you said. I would just say consciousness is the awareness of external slash eternal existence. It's kind of tough though because you can't necessarily prove external existence. You want to add more to that, or?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was saying earlier, right? Like you can't prove external existence because you would have to rely on your senses in order to prove that,
Yeah.
and you can't necessarily rely on your senses, right? But that second part, internal existence, you can prove that you do exist. Your mind exists at least.
Yeah.
Um,
So crazy.
so it's like if you can prove your mind exists, then therefore you are conscious of yourself. But yeah, consciousness is like, yeah. So okay, so let's say we go ahead.
When you said, I just want to add this, because when you said awareness or whatever, there are some machines that are becoming self-aware right now.
Yeah. And would those machines have free will? Well, and would we kind of be like the gods, quote unquote, or the
creators?
People the creators?
Possibly. But like the thing is like, the other thing too is like, like, I don't know, I'm just gonna add this fact in there. Some machines are so good now that they can decide between what is a cat and what isn't a cat. So you show them millions of images, maybe dogs, bears, giraffes, whatever, and then you say find the cats, and it's able to distinguish the two. Like, that's a lot of machine learning or whatever, but to me that fits my framework of an intelligent process, because it had reason, and it, the way it works is it measures mathematically, like this pixel looks like this pixel, so like therefore it's in the shape of a cat, and it does the math to mathematically prove or tell itself that, yeah, this is a cat. That's how it works. But that's backed by the reasoning and the facts. It's not just randomly going, I think it's a cat, it's not a cat. That's just so random. But no, it has like the reasoning behind it. So that fits my framework of intelligence. So machines are starting to become intelligent, but I don't know if you would say that, are they really agent? Like, are they really conscious? Because once again, what is consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, we're kind of creating them as a reflection of ourselves, right? If we were to create an AI, they would just simply be a reflection of ourselves.
Yeah.
So then we program that bias into it, in a sense, right? So then that AI would live the rest of their life. And that's the other thing, right? Is like, AI can technically live forever in a sense, right? It's not like they have any.
Yeah, so it's like not self. It's not like something that is unique to humans is like the idea that that we're not going to exist one day. And like, what are we? Like, okay, so I forgot this argument, but it's really fascinating. The soul, you, is one thing. You either are a being or you're not a being, right? Where a chair, or like let's take a chair, or like we'll take a chair. If you remove like two of its legs and replace it with like, I don't know, marshmallows, well, you would say that like, okay, like now it's like 80% of a chair or whatever, something like that, right?
Yeah.
But if a person loses their arm, you don't say they're 90% a person now. They're still a being. They're still a whole. Like, that's why I bring that up with AI, because like AI, if it can't die, then is it really a being? Like, you either are or you're not, and you're not your parts of it. Like, if a computer loses it's like, does that make sense where I'm going with this? Like, somewhat.
Yeah, and that whole idea. So, I mean, consciousness, and I mean, this is kind of getting like, the afterlife and stuff like that. But does your consciousness cease to exist after you biologically cease to exist? If it's separate, right?
Meaning it's not biology. It's something immaterial, right?
If it's separate, then the argument would flow that, does your consciousness die along with your biological self, or is there some, will you wake up like somewhere else, or like it's an interesting argument that kind of flows together, because if you were to accept one, you kind of have, that's why it's so controversial, and well, not controversial, but an interesting debate, because you'd have to accept all those other ideas down the line,
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, basically, if you have conscious, so basically the afterlife, right? That's what we're getting at here. Yeah, I think that if there really is something immaterial, then that would kind of be great evidence for there being an afterlife, for sure.
Mm.
If it's something apart from your biology, but if your like cells just die and then you cease to exist, um, then yeah, I mean, then that's
Well,
obviously not a soul, because what would be what would be the point of a soul? Like you're really kind of getting into like, I mean, I think you asked earlier, like, well, what created consciousness, right? Um, it's really interesting. I don't know. I said that we're not going to get into specific like religions, but like in the Bible, what I mean, this is one of the most like interesting lines, regardless of if you believe the Bible or not. I think
right, right,
that God created us in His image. Like, what does that even mean? Does that mean God would be like a free mind type of thing? I don't know how you want to define God. That's a whole
right.
nother
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And so if he created us in his image, our image meaning that we also have the ability to create things and to choose things, to be free. I mean, some say God supersedes natural law. He could if he wanted to. If he wanted to intervene, he could supersede natural law, right? I mean, he could
yeah,
break
yeah.
the laws that govern our universe. So then free will, if you go on it with free will, the idea is that you're basically breaking scientific determinism, those physical laws. In a sense, you're in the image of God. Does that make you see that correlation or
Yeah,
no?
that's interesting. Yeah,
Just a theory. I don't know,
yeah,
but
yeah. And I mean, the whole thing of once you cease to exist, I mean, one could make the argument that you technically don't, because you're when you when your biological body dies, it just turns into another form of matter,
yeah,
right? Like it turns into the dirt, or it gets absorbed by the dirt, or wherever, whatever happens, it gets absorbed by other things,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
um so you could make that argument that maybe you technically don't cease to exist, you just
But
exist
but
separately, but maybe not with consciousness. Yeah,
but you're making that argument based off of there is no soul. You're just your brain.
right,
And I
right,
think if
yeah,
you're just your brain, then you don't have free will. I think in order to believe you have free will, I think you have to believe that you have a soul. Because your
or
brain,
yeah,
the brain is just cells, big glob of cells, very complex thing, governed by physical laws. There's no room for free will there. It's just matter. It's just matter. Free will would have to be something apart from matter, I think. Has to be. Has to be. Because everything within matter is governed by laws. That would give you no room for free will. I mean, right? It would give you no room.
yeah. I think I'm trying to think of a argument. So obviously there are physical laws.
Yes, 100%. Not
How but okay, define physical laws. You're talking about like biology and like gravity and
Yep,
all
yep,
those
yep, yep.
kinds of.
Yep.
Got
Like
it. Okay.
you can't basically something that Elon Musk gave a good definition. Stephen Hawking did too, and I wish I had the book with me right now. But basically something that nobody has demonstrated otherwise. So something that is like predictable, right? Something that we constantly observe. I think that's Stephen Hawking's definition. So one, we have constantly observed it. We see gravity, things fall down, right? All the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And something that gives us prediction. We can give it like, if you were to do this, we can predict what's going to happen and it's going to be true. That's a really good definition of physical law. And we have a lot of those. We have a lot of those. Gravity being one of the most well known.
Yeah. Physical laws that.
Like we know how chemistry is going to react with other like elements. So then that gets into like how your brain works and whatever.
Hmm.
That's the context.
Um. And I think one thing that I wanted to bring up that I was thinking about too is this whole idea of time, and how we can, if we did have free will, you would take the argument that we could interact with the world and create certain things, but we still can't interface with time. In other words, we can't necessarily control it or stop it or go back or forward. That's out of our control. Time just continues to move forward in the present, in a sense. You kind of get what I'm saying?
Kind of like what's the correlation? I'm kind of like, where are you going with this?
Well, you can control everything except time, basically. Well, if you take
Wait.
the argument of free will.
Okay, if you have free will. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. If you have free will, you would have to say that, okay, well, you can control everything except time. Because it would seem to be that you can't control that. And
Well, I mean, you can't control planets moving. You can't control a lot of things if you give free will. I can't control what you're going to say right now either. Because I'm not you. I can only control me. That gets into like dichotomy of control and like stoicism, which is honestly, that's a whole nother thing. We got to talk about that one day, but it's a great philosophy. But yeah,
but you could influence.
You could influence, but you can't influence.
Wouldn't you say influence is a minor variation of control?
No.
Okay.
I actually, so in my book, I actually wrote a whole lesson on this that's like 3 pages long. Control, the way I define it, is to be able to control the outcome. You determine the outcome, meaning I won the game. I controlled it.
Yeah.
Influence is to try and sway something to go a certain way, but you're not able to control the outcome. You're not able to determine the outcome. So, you know, I try to influence you to drink the water. You know, it's good for your health. It'll make you feel better. You'll be less tired. You need to drink some water. But I didn't determine it. Where determine it would be like if I like somehow hacked your brain and made you like pick up the cup of water and drink it and swallow the water. Like that would be determining. So there's a difference between control and influence, I think.
Got it. Yeah, I see that.
That's a good
yeah
contrast, right? So so yeah, you can't control planets or whatever. I don't even think you can influence them. If you could, that'd be kind of cool.
Would you say that? Well, I mean, everything has a gravitational pull, even if it's like so minuscule.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, you could technically say maybe, you know, you have some like literally close to zero influence on a gravitational pull of a planet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, you could say it's basically zero. I mean,
yeah, but still, it's still technically there, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say you have control of the planets per se. Maybe.
Yeah, but yeah. So this whole free will thing, right? Yeah, like I think hopefully what we've proven in this first episode on free will, because I guarantee we're gonna go more into it, is that the implications are huge. I don't think anybody can argue otherwise. The implications are huge. It means a lot.
Yeah, it does. And you know what's crazy is I had one of my intro to philosophy classes, we had like one class on this. That's why it's very surface level that I had. At the end of the class, one student said, okay, so what? Like, now what? So like, okay, so maybe we have free will, maybe we don't. So it doesn't matter. Like, I'll still continue. I still proceed, you know, even if I control it or maybe I don't. But I mean, I could see how he would think that, but I think that there's, you know, if you really dig deep, there's a lot of implications that this could have, you know?
Let me tell you my answer. So what? My answer is if we do have free will, that would mean that we're able to supersede natural law, meaning that that's something immaterial. Therefore, I would believe that there is a God. Or then it starts to get into, okay, well, that has huge implications if there is a God or isn't a God, right? So I would go with that. If there is no free will, then I would most likely not believe there is a God. And that changes the way we live our lives, I think. Morality, how we view things, like how we structure our government. You know, the God is a very big thing too. And so I think that, yeah, there is a huge so what. You know, I guess you would still live your life thinking that you do have free will because it's an illusion apparently, or actually you have it. But you do see the God part come into this too, right? Or your thoughts on the afterlife would come into that too, right? That's another big question. What happens when we die? So I definitely think it's bigger than you'd think at first glance. I don't know if you would agree, but that's my
Yeah,
statement.
yeah, yeah. I think at first glance, it's like, okay, whatever. But once you really kind of get deep into it, there's so many applications and inferences that you have to make
Hmm.
if you believe one or the other,
Yeah,
you know?
definitely.
And see, here's the thing. Uh, how can you definitively, will there ever be a way to definitively prove either one, you know? What would have to happen in order for one or the other to be definitively proved? I mean, I guess in the future, if someone disproves gravity or disproves any of these natural laws, um I suppose you could make the argument of the other way, but I mean, I don't see how you can disprove those things.
The other way in what way? Like what's the other way?
Well, everything seems to uh go under this idea that natural laws are fact, right? you'd,
Uh
you'd agree you'd agree that natural law, you can't disprove any natural laws. But
yeah.
if you were to disprove them, then everything else would just crumble.
Oh, you're almost getting into like one unified theory of everything, like
Right,
string theory.
right, right.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing too. Um, but yeah, no, I would agree with you. But like that's a really good question. What would you need to definitively prove that you do have free will or you don't have free will? I think it's probably easier to say you don't have free will. Like what? Like to think about that. What would you definitively need to know that you don't have free will? Because free will seems to be self-evident. Wouldn't you agree? Like everyone thinks that they have free will.
Yeah, I mean, everyone would certainly like to think that they have free will. I
Yeah.
mean, I can choose to pick up this mug. I mean, I chose to do that, I think,
Yeah, you
so.
think. Um, so what would definitively needed to prove that you actually didn't pick up that mug and that you're not actually thinking right now too? Um, hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what would, and could you ever do that? Because philosophy is basically, and that's why people dismiss it a lot, is because you can't definitively prove things either way, like in one sweep. And you really have to think about each one, and you have to kind of balance the science and
Yeah,
the logic.
dude, I was actually thinking about you when I started reading Stephen Hawking's book again. He literally starts it off saying philosophy is dead, and I was like, wow, I don't know about that, because he said that science is a better way to answer questions, but I don't, I think that there's still good use for philosophy and great use for science, but there's some things that philosophy. Do you think there's some things that science can't answer?
Can't answer? Uh, Certainly. Yeah, I think that there are definitely, I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of mysteries that can't be solved, that phenomena that happen,
And
you
so
know?
then you need philosophy to kind of
Think about it. Yeah,
think about
yeah,
and try to pick a side, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so philosophy is still very much present today. And like you said, philosophy is probably going to go up on the rise with new technology. We're debating the ethics of it and how we do things because technology is changing like it's unprecedented, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's such a big thing that, I don't know what would be needed to prove either one. I mean, perhaps, I mean, if you could somehow interface with, you know, some uh immaterial exist, or some higher power, if you could somehow interface with them, then I guess you'd be able to prove something higher. But I mean, I don't know how you would be able to do that, and it's like it gets really deep. Yeah. How long have we been going for?
Shoot, a long time. This is a long podcast.
Yeah.
It doesn't even
Okay.
feel long though because we just been like,
Yeah, we just been
um,
talking about different things.
why, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, my last remark is why don't we do more research on this, including the listener. Give us your thoughts, and but let's do more research, and let's do a part two on this with the
Yeah,
part
yeah.
two of everything else that we're gonna do. So, uh,
Yeah, let's do a part two on this, and
with more
I want,
research, like let's write
yeah,
out some facts and like really bring up some really good stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, on both sides, because like I'm super interested in like the contrast between both,
Hmm.
and I think that will help us get closer to the truth.
Definitely, and that's what we're in pursuit of.
That's what we're in pursuit of. Yep.
Cool.
All right, for sure. So this was episode 10 of Conversations with Brian and Elijah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.